the Border Patrol, and the FBI. Still, nothing could be done with these rumors. Muhammad asked a co-worker if he knew where he could find a silencer, and even told a friend he'd met at the gym that he was planning on making one, and later did. The faux father and son continued to spend all of their time together, often working out or playing chess in solitude, until Una James showed up in Bellingham, Washington to retrieve her son. Soon after Lee had left Florida, still 16 years of age, Una contacted Muhammad once again to tell him to send her child back to her, to which he replied that she would get him back when he was done with him. But she knew where they might be, as she had the phone number to the shelter. Una then took to the road, breaking her lease, leaving her job, and shipping everything she had to Washington State. She contacted the shelter when she arrived 6 days later, on December 14, 2001, and the suspicious reverend picked her up after she explained she was trying to find her son and get him back from John Muhammad. He set her up in a motel and she contacted Bellingham police, and that night, officers found Muhammad and Lee Malvo at the shelter and took the teen with them to the police station. Once Una could prove her identity, she regained physical custody of her son. But once the police realized Muhammad had been in that custody dispute with Millie over his biological children, plus the allegations of kidnapping and their use of false identities, they wanted to know about where Lee Malvo came from and how he came to be in the presence of John Muhammad. They interviewed the teen at Bellingham High, and he gave them a story that differed from what Una James had told them, which resulted in the Border Patrol going and arresting his mother after she was unable to furnish the necessary documentation to prove she was in the United States legally. Lee Malvo was taken into custody as well, going into juvenile detention in Spokane, and his mother to one in Seattle, Washington. They were in custody for just over a month, then released on January 23, 2002, and ordered to attend court hearings at a later date, and the Border Patrol and INS would point fingers at each other regarding their premature release. 4 days after that, Muhammad left the shelter for the final time, and he and Lee reunited, turning up together within days at the apartment of another acquaintance, a Tacoma, Washington gun enthusiast whom Muhammad knew from frequenting the airport. From here, Muhammad attempted to forge more documents while ranting against America, saying that we had gotten what we deserved regarding the terrorist attacks of 9/11. He talked about guns and had his friend help him locate his ex-wife Millie and their children, tracking them to somewhere around Washington, D.C. With their abundant free time, Muhammad trained Lee to be his soldier. Muhammad mastered firearms in the military but was known amongst those circles to be a poor marksman, though to outsiders he bragged about fictional service in elite units. You know the type. The teen was a much more precise shot, leading Muhammad to refer to him as his little sniper, training and critiquing him incessantly at both shooting ranges and in the yards of friends who shared the same passion. Lee paid for any errors with push-ups or laps and replied to Muhammad, whom he called Dad, formally calling him Sir. After 2 weeks of crashing at his friend's house, shooting his friend's guns, and playing Halo on his friend's TV, Muhammad was finally prepared to begin his debaucherous plan of revenge. Months before they were the Beltway snipers or the DC snipers talked about across the world, the pair committed their first murder in Tacoma in Washington State, when 17-year-old Lee Boyd Malvo rang the doorbell of the home where 21-year-old Kenya Cook was staying. The home belonged to a long-ago acquaintance of John and Millie, the woman who worked as the bookkeeper in the family car repair business he had once had, and who remained her friend and advocate through the ensuing years of turmoil. She wasn't home around 7 on February 16, 2002, leaving her unsuspecting niece the victim of the teen and the man with vengeance coursing through his veins. 21-year-old Kenya Cook was killed by a single shot fired by Lee Malvo with Muhammad's friend's gun. The shot entered just below Kenya's left eye, and no one could figure out what the hell had happened, a common theme throughout this extended murder spree. Initially, Kenya's aunt never considered that the bullet had actually been meant for her, and though the victim's ex-boyfriend had been initially suspected, he was the entirety of their list of persons of interest. Lee and Muhammad melted into the night and out of sight, though they were still lingering in the area, even being arrested for shoplifting food. Lee's mother described staying in Washington and only giving up chasing after her son after several instances where she thought they were trying to kill her, but she couldn't leave knowing that her child was likely in danger. Malvo and Muhammad encountered Una 2 times on the bus. The first time, she tried to grab her son, but he was able to escape her grasp. She spoke to him occasionally, and he would tell her to stop looking for him before they killed her. But no matter how many times she asked, he would never tell her who they were. Did he mean the 2 of them? The second time she saw them on the bus, she said they pursued her, but she somehow escaped. And she never looked for her son again, though she remained in the area. Thus began the pair's deadly cross-country travels, which was really a crime spree. Taking a bus to Tucson, Arizona as John and Lee Muhammad, the pair visited with one of the older man's sisters before being dropped back off at the bus 3 days later. On March 16, 2002, however, they didn't leave. Instead, they shot and killed 60-year-old Jerry Ray Taylor on the grounds of Fred Enke Golf Course. And though a man fitting either of the pair's general description was seen shortly after he was killed, and some DNA was found, no killer was identified. Jerry Ray Taylor had been shot in the back with a rifle, presumably from the nearby bird sanctuary, and his body hidden in the bushes, where he was soon found by other golfers. 6 days later, the pair boarded a bus traveling as Edward Williams and Edward Williams Jr., stole the credit cards of a fellow traveler, and used one once back in Tacoma, Washington. They stayed wherever they could around Tacoma and Bellingham for the next 2 months and continued to work out at their old YMCA when in town. A friend they met there would recall later that Muhammad had great interest in making a silencer and talked about causing an explosion on a highway or about killing police officers. Sometimes Lee would stay with the man when Muhammad traveled, and on one occasion told him about killing the golfer in Arizona, robbing him, and hiding his body in the woods, though he said there had been 2 victims. The pair then left Bellingham and went back to Tacoma, borrowing Muhammad's old army buddy's .44 Magnum revolver and shooting up an unoccupied Jewish temple in the night. When the rabbi noticed bullet holes, investigators gathered evidence, and those bullets were eventually traced back to Muhammad and Malvo once the rabbi made the police make comparisons. But that wouldn't be for several more months and many more shootings, injuries, and murders later. In the meantime, Muhammad stole a new, upgraded Bushmaster XM15 E2S with a 16-inch barrel from a Bullseye Shooter Supply on July 16, 2002, without them even realizing it was gone for, yep, you guessed it, several more months. Headed for the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area and family and friends with which he felt he could next seek intermittent refuge, the bus next took John Muhammad and John Muhammad Jr. through Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. On July 20th, 2002, they stole a .22 caliber Magnum revolver from a gun show in El Paso, adding it to their growing arsenal. Once in Louisiana, the pair stayed overnight with one of Muhammad's cousins until his stories of espionage and a mission searching for a stolen cache of explosives had her scrambling for a way to tell them they had to move on. And they did, visiting Muhammad's siblings and ex-wife, oldest son, and friends from high school throughout the following week. On August 1st, just after 8 p.m., 50-year-old John Gita crossed paths with the pair as he fixed his flat and they had general conversation about the mall hours. When the man went to retrieve his tire from the back, he recalled seeing two separate figures moving around at the front of the vehicle. He only had time to ask, "What are you doing?" before Lee Malvo shot him in the neck from 5 feet away. Though he suffered wounds to his neck, back, and shoulder, he escaped serious injury. Back on the bus, this time as Lee Williams and Lee Williams Jr., Lee Malvo and John Muhammad traveled back to Washington State a few weeks later, but only for a few days. But it was long enough to alarm his old army buddy with talk of homemade silencers. He asked if Muhammad was planning to target his ex-wife. The pair also stealthily visited Muhammad's other old army buddy on August 17, 2002, but only for long enough to steal a Remington 700 .308 rifle from his vehicle. The plan seemed to be coming together. The pair had acquired a respectable arsenal for just the two of them, but what they were missing was seed money. So far, they had stolen what they needed and wanted with varying levels of success, but their circumstances would change following the September 5, 2002 robbery of Paul LaRuffa, owner of Clinton, Maryland's Margellina's Italian restaurant. Mr. LaRuffa was ambushed as he got in his car to leave after closing time, shot multiple times in the left arm, chest, and side by a .22 caliber pistol held in the hands of a somewhat small individual. The laptop and $3,500 stolen that night gave Muhammad and Lee Malvo almost everything they needed to move to the next step. The pair immediately took the bus north, and in Camden, New Jersey, Muhammad had a relative of an acquaintance from Antigua help them purchase a car for $250, a blue 1990 Chevy Caprice that in a former life had belonged to an undercover police officer in nearby border town. Having traveled south again, this time to Alexandria, Virginia on September 12, 2002, the pair are soon in Silver Lake, Maryland, and in the vicinity of Muhammad's ex-wife's new residence. 2 days later, the pair found themselves near Zelkowitz Hellendale Beer and Wine, where 22-year-old Rupinder Oberoi was shot in the lower back as he and the owner closed up for the night. The man was fortunate to survive his injuries, which included a bruised kidney and liver and lacerated colon and diaphragm. There was no explanation for this shooting that anyone could ascertain. He wasn't robbed, carjacked, or otherwise assaulted, and there were not enough bullet fragments left for any future comparisons. An employee at their grocery store across the street did report to police that an older model, dark-colored vehicle, maybe a Chevy Caprice, was seen exiting the parking lot just after the shot rang out. However, they figured it was probably unrelated. The case was cold from the get-go. The very next day, and 4 miles from Margellina's restaurant, a man named Muhammad Rashid was shot while leaving 3 Roads Liquor for the night on September 15, 2002. As the 32-year-old locked the door around 10 p.m., he was shot at twice before turning around and seeing a smallish figure point and fire at him, hitting him point blank in the abdomen. This attack was a robbery, and Rashid's wallet was taken. He too survived, and this time there were enough bullet fragments left for comparison, and they would be found later to match the bullets that struck Paul LaRuffa. Malvo and Muhammad remained in the area for another week, but on September 21, 2002, were spotted in their car outside Sammy's package store in Atlanta, Georgia, just after midnight, making the owner nervous enough to caution her employee to stay inside a few more minutes. Million Woldemariam did not heed her warning, however, and went back outside to investigate, only to be immediately and fatally gunned down and robbed, and those bullets were likely from a .22. Both 24-year-old Kelly Adams and her 52-year-old boss, Claudine Parker, were shot in the parking lot of a Montgomery, Alabama liquor store as they left work for the night. Kelly Adams was shot through the back of her neck, with the bullet exiting her cheek, and she survived. However, owner Claudine Parker was killed by a shot from a .223 rifle round that severed her spinal cord. Law enforcement responded quickly